Hey everyone, it's been a while, but I'm back and I'd like to wish you all the best and lots of creativity, love, and good health for the new year. Now, before answering your questions, which are on these cards, I'd like to touch on something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, which is renaming the channel to The World's Project. I've made a little post on my Instagram and YouTube community page where you can read more about this change, but I really just wanted to inform you about the change face to face before you would wonder, hey, where did 808 go? I didn't go anywhere, I'm just continuing under a new name. So now that we've talked about this, let's actually start answering your questions. First question, when did you start producing music and have you discovered your own style or sound yet? I started producing music like 11 years ago. I was on a vacation in Italy and suddenly this idea popped up inside my head that was like, how cool would it be if I was able to make my own music? So when I got back home, I kind of forced my parents to buy me Magic's Music Maker. And soon after that, I switched to FL Studio, and that's where it really all started. I think 2 or 3 months later, I finished my first song and I released it on YouTube. And actually, it's still on there, so I put it in the description below in case you're interested. But yeah, that's really how it all started. So have I discovered my own style or sound yet? I wouldn't say I really have my own signature sound in terms of that there's like one sound that really sounds like me, but I'd rather say it's like the combination of ways I do certain things within my software, like playing melodies and chords and processing certain sounds that really make my signature sound, you know? And I think this goes for anyone. It's really about the combination or the aggregation of specific ways in which you do things that make your own sound, that make you unique. So yeah, I would say I'm on my way to finding my own sound, but I guess it's an ever evolving and ever developing quest. So yeah, hope that answers your question. Next question, where to find a singer to collaborate as a very small producer? That's a good question. What I often do is I go to Spotify and there's these Fresh Finds playlists. And in these playlists, you often find very talented but relatively unknown singers and vocalists. So what I do whenever I hear somebody I like, I just go to their profile where you often find their website or their Facebook page. And on one of these, you usually find an email address. So then I just reach out to their email and hope I get a response. So I think last year I sent emails to like 200 vocalists and singers. And maybe 10, 15 of them actually answered me. So it's definitely challenging to find people who want to work with you. But I'm quite confident that there will always be artists who want to work with you as long as they like what they hear. And if that doesn't work out, then there's always other ways. For example, platforms like Sound Better or Fiverr, where you can actually hire singers and vocalists to write and record for you. Now, this might be quite expensive, but if you can afford to spend this kind of money, I definitely think it's a sound investment to make in your future, in your career as a producer or artist. Who's your favorite singer or the one you would like to produce for? Right now I am in love with Coldplay and I just can't stop listening to their old albums and especially the Viva La Vida album as well as Parachute. So yeah, I would love to work with Coldplay and Chris Martin, but apart from that I would also love to work with or produce for Imagine Dragons, One Republic and Jon Bellion, who are all massive inspirations for me. Next question. Maybe some things you wish you knew when you were still at the start, Martin. So yeah, I think the one thing I wish I knew when I started producing is that it really doesn't matter what kind of music you make or produce, as long as you love and enjoy creating it. So I had this phase in which I only produced music that sounded like the music that was in the charts at that time. And in hindsight, I didn't really enjoy making that kind of music, but I thought I had to create this type of music in order to succeed. So the lesson I learned is really just create whatever feels good and whatever you feel like creating. And don't care too much about what other people expect you to create. Is learning music theory very important in music production? In general, it's always helpful and practical to learn about music theory, so different scales, different types of chords. But I think it also really depends on where you're coming from in terms of natural ability. So there's people who have relative or even absolute pitch, and these people generally find it easier to hear or feel what kinds of notes go well with other notes. But there's also people who find this more difficult. So for this latter group of people, I think it's even more helpful to learn about music theory. But in general, I'd say it's recommendable for anybody who is producing or making music. Next question, mixing, bruh. Okay, I think I can give you a few tips on mixing. The first would be to mix at a low volume level. So whether you're using headphones or monitors to mix, I would definitely recommend you to put your volume at conversational level, because this makes it a lot easier to make decisions as to which sounds should be louder than other sounds than when you're mixing at high volume levels. My second tip would be to address the source. And what I mean by that is, if you have a sound that's going to need a lot of mixing and processing before it will sound good, chances are that your sound isn't good enough in the first place. And I would probably consider changing the sound rather than going crazy on the mixing and processing. Now, of course, if you want to process a sound heavily for creative purposes, go ahead. But generally, if you need to repair your sound a lot, chances are your sound isn't good enough in the first place. Finally, my third piece of mixing advice would be to apply the concept of less is more to your mixes and processing. So over the years, I've found that my most balanced and organic sounding mixes are the ones that have the least amount of processing going on the individual mixer channels. So I would definitely recommend you to stick with this less is more, this minimalistic approach when it comes to mixing. Could you tell us a bit on a career in music, like what specific jobs or departments we can get into? That's a really good question. Of course, there are a lot of things you can do in the music industry and even as a producer. So there is this really insightful blog post by Make Pop Music, which I've linked below. And it not only talks about the different ways you can make a living as a producer, but it also talks about the importance of diversifying your income streams. So having different streams of income to diversify and decrease your risk as a creative artist. Don't limit yourself to just one job, but actually think in terms of having multiple jobs that all contribute to the living you eventually want to make as a creative artist. Next question. Should we be working on our own style from the very start, or should we first learn up to a certain level of music production before working on our own style of music? That's a really interesting question. So here's the problem. As a beginning producer, it will be very difficult to translate whatever is inside your mind to your software, right? So it will be very hard to immediately find your own style and do your own thing. So I would definitely advise you to start learning the basics through watching YouTube tutorials, and specifically by remaking existing songs that you like. And if you keep doing this, and also if you keep switching back and forth between your software and YouTube tutorials and applying what you learn in these tutorials to what you're doing inside your software, then over time you will gain more and more ability to translate whatever is inside your mind to your software. So I would definitely recommend you to do that, and you'll notice that over time it will become easier and easier to actually start experimenting with the things inside your head and to translate and execute these ideas inside your digital audio workstation. So yeah. Is it possible to produce music like you or other great artists as a self-taught producer? If yes, then how should I do it? Yes, it's definitely possible. It's actually how I did it myself. Basically, the only way I learned music production was through YouTube videos. So how I went about this is I would always try to recreate songs I liked. And of course, as a beginning producer, this is quite tough. You don't know how to make the sounds. So whenever I got stuck, I would go to YouTube and I would search how to recreate or how to remake this and that sound. And 9 out of 10 times, I would find something helpful. I would apply the steps that were explained in the video to FL Studio, and I was able to move on with my remake. And of course, this is a very slow and gradual process if you're a beginning producer. But if you keep doing and applying this time by time, then you'll definitely become a better producer. So to answer your question, yes, it's definitely possible to produce music professionally as a self-taught producer. Final question, can you tell how to balance school and music? That's a really tough question. It's definitely something I've been struggling with myself. I started a master's degree in September 2021, and ever since it's been really challenging to combine my life as a producer and a content creator with my life as a student. But now that I've found this balance, I would say the main lesson I learned is to get really systematic about your week schedule. So any week contains 168 hours, and say you spend 10 hours a day on sleeping, showering, eating, and that kind of stuff. Then there's about 100 hours left each week. So it's quite unlikely that you'll need all of these hours to work or to go to school. So there will always be hours and time to work on your passion, for example, making music. Now the key is of course to find these hours. So for me personally, I made it work by dissecting my schedule, going over each hour, asking myself, do I need this hour to go to school, to work on school, or to actually go work? And if the answer was no, I would allocate this hour to either making music or recording a new video or coming up with new video topics. Either way, to be creative and to work on my passions. So for me, it's really all about finding these open spots, allocating these open spots to doing the things I love, and making this process a weekly habit. And that's how I balance school and music. And that's it for your questions. I'd like to thank you for watching and for sending in your questions. And I'd also like to thank you for your immense support. I remember starting 2021 at like 100 subscribers, and it's insane to realize that we've grown our community to 8,500 subscribers by the end of 2021. I'm really grateful for each and every one of you, and I can't wait to grow the community even further with you. So I'll see you next video.